Welcome to Ordinary Teachers and Students, where we get to hear teachers and students tell us their extraordinary stories. My hope is that through this podcast, ordinary teachers from around the world can relate to the stories they hear and get some timely suggestions and ideas. My name is Alan Cheng, and I'm a life coach as well as a university lecturer. My vision is to make life coaching a part of every school. Today, I'm delighted to invite Nathan Burns onto our podcast. Nathan is a metacognitive researcher, author, and consultant. He has so far written 2 books on metacognition, with 4 more in the pipeline, dozens of articles, how-to guides, and recorded multiple podcasts. He currently supports schools around the UK with staff training, workshops, student sessions, and curriculum development. He previously worked in schools across Derbyshire as a head of maths, pastoral leader, and more able and talented coordinator. I'm very excited to learn more about metacognition from Nathan. Let's welcome Nathan. Hi, Nathan.
Hi, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So that's quite a long intro there. Do you have anything else to add to that? I mean, I'm sure there are things that you want our audience to know about you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it feels like there's a lot in there. So I guess, yeah, I was a teacher for 6 years, and then my passion was always teaching and learning, and in particular metacognition. So
Yeah.
that was something I started doing during sort of my masters and NPQs and that sort of thing. And then the opportunity came for me to launch sort of freelance consultancy, all things metacognition. So yeah, I've officially left the classroom, and now, yes, I can support schools around the country, working with universities. So basically, the thing that I really love, I love being in the classroom, but the thing that I really love, metacognition and teaching and learning, is something that, yeah, I'm getting to do every single day now. So every day is meetings and working with schools and writing and research. So yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's great. So what got you started teaching in the first place then?
So a little bit of a strange story. It's actually politics that got me into teaching. So I was involved in politics before going to university.
Yep.
That's always the career that I thought I was going to have. I knew that there was sort of jobs I could go in and work. I went to university to study politics.
Okay.
And about 6 months in, I hated it and I wanted to drop out. I really didn't like it. In the end, I kept going. Sort of, I finished the degree. It got better as I went along. The first few units were awful, but it got better. But the thing that really stood out to me, even though I really enjoyed it and I loved the theory and all of that sort of stuff, it just didn't seem like we were helping anybody. So the politics you saw on the news, so at the time it was things like the bedroom tax and sort of like food banks were just starting to become more commonplace. Those were the things we were seeing in the news. And then I would go into a lecture or seminar and we'd be looking at the presidential system of Brazil or how voters align themselves. And it was interesting, but it just didn't feel like I was making very much difference. And I think I was actually thinking about this yesterday when the election got announced. There's a big difference between the politics we study and the politics that actually impacts our day-to-day lives. And that really annoyed me, but I thought I was going there and learning about how we could make people's lives better, and that wasn't what it was about.
Yeah.
So I then thought, right, what can I actually do that still has a bit of politics and I guess small p politics, but actually makes a difference to people's lives, and that was teaching. You know, I can go in every single day and teach people and hopefully make their lives that a little bit better, their days a little bit better, make their lives a little bit better. So teaching seems to fit with that. So that's why I entered the classroom. So I did my degree and then started straight away through Teach First. So instantly went from a lecture room looking at politics to 16-year-olds needing to pass their GCSE in a classroom in South Derbyshire. So yeah, quite a whirlwind. But yeah, that's how I ended up in the classroom.
What made you turn to maths then? Like, so obviously, like you did a degree in politics, and it seems like you started with politics as well.
So it was I guess somewhat selfish. Every school needs a maths teacher. So I did maths up to A level. There was somewhat of a maths element actually in the politics. At first inspection, you'd imagine. So yeah, everybody needs a maths teacher. Maths teachers also, it's very easy to train. There's lots of funding, and I thought, right, well, I need a job. I want a job that I can stick in with. And I thought, well, I'll train as a maths teacher, but business studies was always the thing that I loved. I loved it at school. I thought if I'm going to teach, I'll go and do business studies. But then by the time I finished my training as a maths teacher, I was just too in love with it. You know, 2 years of teaching, really getting into it. You know, I looked for opportunities. You know, I'd happily cover a lesson here or there. But really, I loved maths. I was getting so comfortable and confident with it. And all of that enjoyment from GCSE and A-level maths came back. So yeah, I just stuck teaching maths.
That's great. I mean, you sound like the typical maths teacher who loves teaching maths. Like, so like pretty much every maths teacher I know, like they seem to be really, really into maths. So, but what made you move into consultancy then? I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier already, but do you want to tell us a little bit more
Yeah.
about that?
So I think it was, I love being in the classroom, but my skill set and my
Mm,
passions really are around teaching and learning and sort of like organization, curriculum development. So yeah,
mm,
I'm good in the classroom, but I excel in terms of sort of like the putting the curriculums together, looking at
yep,
TNL, looking at
yep,
training, looking at staff development.
yep.
That's really what my skill set really suited for, and that's what I love. So for years and years, I've done metacognition on the sides, like the books I'd written, they were on the,
Mm,
that was getting home at 6 o'clock, putting the kids to bed and then writing that, late at night. So that was always kind of like a passion.
yep.
And yeah, I just sort of thought, well, I had a chance to jump into consultancy. I thought if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. The second book's coming out in sort of 6 weeks' time.
Yep.
There were so many opportunities, so many people I can link up with. I'm just going to go for it, see what happens. And the reception so far has been brilliant. Just so many people just so passionate about metacognition. I mean, why wouldn't you be? It can have so much impact on students.
Mm,
And yet so many people are just sort of reaching out, and so many people want to work together and see how it can work in their schools and with their students. So
mm.
it's been absolutely fantastic to jump into it. And I really feel like it's been a positive jump so far. So hopefully I'm still can remain helpful for schools and for students in the coming months and years.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. And so normally the main body of the podcast is where we take a deep dive into a topic that you're really passionate about. Would my guess be that you're going to talk about metacognition?
Your guess would be spot on. But I think what I really want to do is home in on some of the myths of metacognition, because
Yeah.
I've noticed, yeah, from going around and talking about metacognition, there are a lot of myths there. Actually, in my first book, one of the chapters that I have is just about the myths of metacognition, because not
Mm,
not so much it was introduced in the early noughties as learning to learn and kind of fell out. No, not that to me is sort of bad implementation and twisting the theory, but actually some of the myths of metacognition, this type of student can do it, or it's only for this type of student. I think those are
mm.
really critical myths to challenge, and actually quite
Yep.
concerning myths that have managed to develop in education.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that'd be a great topic to talk about. I guess before we take a deep dive into the myths, maybe perhaps give us a very basic definition of what you would say metacognition is, just in case any of our audience aren't familiar with this term.
Yeah, so metacognition, I know it can be quite hard to define. It's often seen as quite a complicated theory. Let me just pull up a couple of theories here. So that there's two theories that I always go to. So one is from Flavel, from 1976. It's really stood the test of time. So that's what, 48 years ago off the top of my head. So it's really, really standing the test of time. So that definition is, I am being metacognitive if I notice that I am having more trouble learning A than B, if it strikes me that I should double check C before accepting it as fact. Now,
Mm,
I really think of all the definitions I've seen, that's my favorite one. That's the one that I use time and time again. But I actually tried to come up with my own definition.
yeah.
I guess dumb it down to some extent. I'm not too sure.
Mm,
But anyway, I said that metacognition was the little voice inside your head that constantly evaluates and informs your actions. And I think
mm,
anyone who works in education, we're always thinking about, oh, that went well. Oh, I should do this better. Oh, that
mm,
strategy worked quite well. That worked for this student. That's all metacognitive. It's considering what we've done, what went well about it, and what we
yeah.
can do better next time. And it's
Mm,
that constant loop, isn't it? I'm going to do it like this. I do it. Ah, that went well. I'm going to do the same next time. Or that didn't go well. Next time I
mm,
do it, I'll change it. And it's that constant loop of learn and review and improve, and learn and review and improve. So
yeah.
that to me is what metacognition really is.
Thank you for that. And I guess a big part of that is awareness, right? So maybe the difference between someone who is aware of what's going on in there and
Yeah,
aware of whether they are actually going in the right direction, whether they're evaluating, is the difference between whether they're using any metacognitive strategies or not, right?
yeah, exactly. So again, you just hit on a really important thing that I often talk about, and that's like the levels of metacognition. So
Mm,
someone
mm,
isn't, it's not like you are metacognitive or you're not. There were
mm,
so many different sort of points in there. So again, the work I would go back to is Perkins from 1992. Again, another piece of research which has really stood the test of time. So Perkins talks about there sort of being like tacit
mm,
metacognitive practitioners. So that is what most students in secondary schools will be. So tacit students they do a bit of thinking, but they're not really thinking about it. They're not thinking, oh, I'm going to do it like this. I'll do it like that. This went well. That went well. They're going through the motions. And I think too often students in school, well, often in a lot of schools, it's like, they're doing the work good. And that's as much as not what we hope for, but that's the first stepping stone, actually getting all the kids sitting down doing the work.
Right.
But obviously that's such a low bar of metacognition. And then we build up metacognition. So you then get somebody who's aware metacognitively. So they know that they're making choices. They're maybe not being proactive, but they kind of know, I'm doing it like this. They're not thinking about the why, but I'll do it like this, I'll do it like that. I did this last time. When you get a little bit better and you get strategic and you think, I'm going to do it like this because, I'm going to do it like this because of what happened last time, because of what the teacher said, because of how it worked in that exam. And then you finally get to the pinnacle of metacognition, which is being reflective. So that is somebody who's always constantly evaluating. So that's me, that's you, that's most teachers around the country. It's anyone really who's working in education, working with students. It's that constant, like, this is working well. No, I need to change what I'm doing. It's not like plan and evaluate. We're also doing that monitoring in the middle. So we're thinking, this isn't working. I'm going to change tack before we get to the end of this. Or actually, I can tell the students don't know what I'm on about. I'm going to stop now. And I'm going to restart. I'm not just going to keep powering on through. So that is your reflective sort of practitioner. Your reflective metacognitive individual.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. So the 4 levels would be tacit, being aware, strategic, and then reflective at the top right.
Yeah. Exactly. Brilliant. Yeah. I think just to throw in another curveball, because I know this is, we'll get on to myths, and this is another myth. Obviously, we've said that it's not sort of dichotomous. It's not you are metacognitive or you're not. I think we've got to be careful with those 4 levels as well, because just because someone is reflective, say, me as a maths teacher, someone in my classroom could be really reflective. They're really good at analysing the strategies. They know when to stop because something's obviously not going right. But just because they're reflective in maths doesn't mean that they're going to be reflective in English or in history or in Spanish. Because let's think about the word metacognitive. You're being meta of your cognition. You're analysing your cognition. So any single time that cognition changes, the meta aspects actually change, because the way that we go about analysing our algebra problem is completely different to how we go about analysing our our history essay, isn't it? Those are completely different skill sets. And whenever that cognition changes, so I think that's something that really struck me, because as a maths teacher, I was like, but even someone who was really good at algebra metacognitively, if we got to like the shape unit again, shape and algebra are so different. Yes, they're maths, but they're so different. But actually, metacognition changes even just across domains within one subject area. So it's so variable, and yeah, they do vaguely carry across. I'm metacognitive, I'd hope, especially in maths and with the work I do. That should carry across to when I'm essay writing or to when I'm doing an application or whatever it might be. But it's not going to carry across as perfectly as it's not on a 100% sort of translation from one domain to the other.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Actually, that's the first time I've thought of it like that, because what you said just now was that it's subject specific and possibly even topic specific. So when someone is metacognitive within a subject or topic, doesn't mean it might transfer to another subject or topic, right?
That's fascinating. Exactly that. Yeah.
So you were going to talk about myths, right? Where do you want to start with these myths then?
So there are 4 of them. So we can start from the top and work our way through. So I think the first myth, the first barrier I've always come up against, and actually these all go back to kind of like the same solution. But the first myth I've come up against is that metacognition is only for high attaining students. It's only for those kids at the top of the class. The ones who are getting the grade 9s, who are getting the A stars, who are Oxford and Cambridge sort of potentials. And that is so wrong, because I guess firstly, just because you're cognitively very good, you could be metacognitively useless. I mean, there is a strong correlation. If you're academically doing better, you're probably going to be better metacognitively, because otherwise you wouldn't be so good cognitively. You need to be able to consider and evaluate and ponder those different strategies. But I think the reason this myth has kind of existed is because the evaluation or the meta depends on the cognition. So take me, for example. If we were having a look at a new topic, say, you were teaching me something new, Ella, if I didn't understand the cognition, if I didn't understand the facts you were telling me, then I'm probably not going to be able to do the meta. I'm not going to be able to do the analysis. Whereas if you told me loads of new stuff and I got it all and I embedded it into my schema, then I would naturally be better. I would be able to do that meta stuff. And that actually that does make sense. So I can understand why people think, well, if you don't get the content, how are you going to be able to do the meta? And that's true. Meta, sort of the meta of the metacognitive, only happens when we can really understand the knowledge. But that doesn't mean because you're low prior attaining, there isn't something you can be metacognitive about. Just because your grades are slightly lower, or just because your marks are slightly lower, doesn't mean that there aren't questions or topics that you don't really grasp. Just because you're getting 50% on a paper doesn't mean you're getting everything wrong. It probably means you're getting, half the questions spot on. So on those questions you're getting spot on, you can be metacognitive. So I think the real takeaway there is, yes, it is easier to reflect and to monitor if you really understand that content, if you really understand that curriculum. It's a lot easier to be metacognitive, but it is not limited to just those kids at the top of the class.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I was thinking, like, for high attainers, maybe they're achieving really good grades because they use metacognitive strategies. And so maybe, do you think it would be correct to say that perhaps it's the lower achievers who actually need to be taught quite intentionally these strategies, how to be metacognitive?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think any student, because even me, even you, we can still improve metacognitively. There's no sort of like limit to how much we can improve, because every single day in our jobs we'll be going, oh, that went well, oh, I should have done this like this. Even as kind of like, top of our fields, we're still continually reflecting on what we're doing. So a kid in year 11 who will be getting a grade 9 in the maths GCSE, well, actually they've still got room for improvement, because when they get to A-level maths or further maths or uni maths, there's going to be stuff they don't get or strategies they need to be aware of. So every single student needs that explicit teaching of strategies. And I guess by that, I don't mean sit them down and don't do content for now and say, think about this, think about this. I'm not saying go and do theory heavy lessons. I'm talking about building it into what you're doing and be explicit with your thinking and those strategies. But you're spot on. Those low attainers, maybe they don't get that metacognitive input maybe from home, maybe they didn't have it from primary, maybe they're kind of like a bit more of a late bloomer sort of academically, so they're going to need those skills, and you're absolutely spot on. It does help leverage improvement. I mean, the EEF say that metacognitive teaching can lead to a 7-month improvement in students' attainment. That's like having an extra bonus school year of learning. That's huge. And that's just from metacognitive input. So I think that shows us that if we do metacognitive strategies with those low prior attainers, it's only going to help.
Sure, brilliant. So what's the second myth then?
So the second one is that it's not for students with SEN. And I think it's unfortunately, and it's something I've written about, I think often people think SEN low attaining, which sometimes is true, sometimes it isn't. And I think that goes back to what we've just been discussing. Just because an SEN student might be lower attaining doesn't mean that they can't be metacognitive. I think sometimes as well, people fear overload and they fear introducing different strategies and different ideas. But again, I feel that's built on a misconception, on a myth, on a judgment even that SEN students learn any differently from other students. And that's just not true. Good teaching for SEN students is good teaching for any student. So we always talk about, if a student is autistic, make sure that we're being very clear with our language, make sure that we're breaking it down step by step, make sure that we're being very clear on what we're asking them to do during a task. Well, that's just good for every student, for everybody.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
It's that sort of like quality first teaching. It's like, well, actually being very clear, explaining why we're doing things, explaining what you want students to do. That works for every student. If they've got ADHD, if they've got global delay, yes, different students will need different supports and different, mechanisms potentially. But actually, just quality teaching for SEN students is quality teaching for everybody. So if everybody can do metacognitive strategies, so can the SEN students. And I appreciate that in stressful environments where grades really matter, where we're in short supply of TAs, taking a student, if a student's got a one-to-one or there's a TA in the room, you're probably really frantically just concerned about the content. There's this SEN student, maybe a bit of schooling, maybe they've just come out of an alternative provision. You're really concerned, obviously, about them just picking up the content. But that doesn't mean that they're capable of actually picking up the metacognition. There's no reason why you can't say to a student, well, why are you using that strategy?
Mm.
What did you do last time? How did it work last time? Look at, turn the page back, look at what we did. Now apply that to the new one. That's all
Yeah.
metacognition because that's learning from previous cognition.
Mm.
Um, we do those things anyway, but obviously, yeah, it works for every single student.
Yeah, and it seems like doing that actually acts as a scaffold for the students. Again, particularly for SEN students, particularly for
Yeah,
students who might be lower achievers. I think it's great scaffolding for them to help them to achieve what we want them to achieve, right?
exactly. And I think maybe a lot of students automatically go, "Oh, I did this last time." But if a student isn't automatically going, "I did this last time,"
Mm.
let me look at the page before. Well, yeah, those scaffolds, we're teaching them really good techniques, really,
Yeah,
aren't we?
yeah.
We're saying to people, look at what you did last time. Look at
Mm.
the model you've got down in your book. Have a look at your knowledge
Yeah,
organizer, whatever
yeah.
it might be. Give them really high quality strategies, and that helps the student become more independent.
Mm.
SEN, low attaining,
Mm.
high attaining, actually. Students have got strategies to cope. They become more resilient and they become more determined and more engaged because they know that there are ways that they can approach problems and do them on their own.
Yeah, and it seems like it's very good for memory as well, right? Because sometimes teachers often assume that, oh, I've taught it last lesson or I taught it in the last module, therefore they
Yeah,
should remember it, right? But I think what you're saying is really intentionally helping the students to revisit previous strategies or theories they've learned to help what they're doing right now.
yeah, exactly. Because one of the key things I talk about in metacognition is one of the easy ways for teachers to introduce it is through questioning. And it's
Yeah.
just tweaking our questioning instead of sort of going through a model and saying, what would the next step be? What would the next step be? Actually
Mm.
saying, put a question up on the board and saying, right, when have we done a similar question?
Mm.
What did
Mm.
we do during that question? How did I
Mm.
go about it? Okay, what is similar about this question? What is
Mm.
different? What do you think I might be able to draw from the previous question and connect it to the current question? And yeah, that's great for depth of learning. And that's
Mm.
really, really good, like you say, for retrieval. Because if a student can't remember what they did in the last lesson, they actually
Yeah.
know, right, let me go back, let me have a look, let me see what's relevant about that and drag it
Mm.
into what's important in what we're doing today. So yeah, exactly. It really, really is helpful with retrieval.
Yeah, brilliant. Sure. So we've got two myths so far. What's the third one then?
Yes. The third one is that metacognition is just for old students.
Mm.
And I think that just comes from it's quite complicated. I know a
Mm.
lot of teachers sometimes need a clarification of exactly what metacognition is. It's a
Mm.
really
Mm.
abstract theory. You can't see it. It's all in the head. It kind of happens. So it seems quite complex. So
Mm.
therefore, it's only for older students. Um, Now, let me give you an example for my son. So he'd have been 2.5.
Yeah.
He had one of those wooden toys where you just have to like bang the pegs
Yeah.
through, like you just bang the pegs from one side through to the other, and you
Yeah.
turn it over and do the same thing. Now it's just a little wooden hammer, kind of like mallet thing, but he was
Mm.
knocking it like on the side. So instead of
Mm.
just one of the pegs going through, he was knocking several through at a time, or they just weren't going through that quickly. He kind of looked at the hammer, saw the flat side, turned it around in his hand, and then just started hammering through each peg
Mm.
one by
Mm.
one. And obviously, he wasn't actively thinking in his head and going, this isn't going to plan. I'll have it.
Mm.
He was just kind of like trying to work it out. He was just playing around with it. And when he found a technique that worked, he went for it. Well, that's definitely tacit, but
Mm.
that's metacognition. He was evaluating. Oh, he's like, oh, this isn't going how I want it to go.
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
going to try something else. Oh, now it's going how I want it to go. Do, 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 do. Oh, I'll salt it, flip it over. Do, do, do. And he was only 2.5. That's metacognition. And studies
Mm.
show actually that metacognition is happening, in preschool, in primary.
Yeah.
Um, it accelerates kind of like I was reading some research the other day. It was kind of suggesting like year 5, year 6 onwards. When students
Yeah.
are kind of getting to like 8, 9, it really accelerates them because they've got more content knowledge. They're starting to get coherent ideas
Mm.
of
Mm.
subjects in their head. By the time you get to the end of primary, you've got a knowledge of history. You can link it together. You've got some sort of like coherence going on in your head there. But obviously, before that, kids are still being strategic. They're still tackling problems. And as soon as somebody is tackling a problem, you can start to ask questions like, why is that working? Why is that
Mm.
not working? Why do you think that worked better? What are you going to do next time? If you've got young kids and you're listening to this podcast, then go and ask them some of those questions or go and observe how they play. And actually, you'll see them doing that all the time, reflecting on what they're doing, changing what they're doing, and trying to make it go a little bit better. So yeah, it happens with kids of every single age, and it is true. The older you get, the more content you've got, the easier it is to link stuff and draw
Mm.
connections. But as soon as you start actively thinking and cognitively processing, you're instantly going to be starting to be metacognitive.
Yeah, and it wouldn't hurt to get more practice when you're younger, right? So like you said,
Yeah,
maybe year 5 to year 6 onwards, they get better. But before that doesn't mean they're incapable of doing so, right? And I think
yeah, exactly.
yeah, parents and teachers can, like you said, ask questions to prompt them to think about their thinking.
Yeah, and it is that double win actually that helps strengthen the metacognition, but that really helps deepen the learning because if kids
Mm,
know,
mm.
oh, I'm doing this because this is working, because all of those different aspects, that actually really deepens their learning as well, which is
Yep,
it's a
yep.
double win. They become more metacognitive, and their learning gets that bit stronger.
Do you think it deepens their learning because it helps with like learning transfer?
Yeah, I think so, and it really helps that coherency, and they really develop that mind map and start to draw
Mm,
connections between topics and between strategies and understanding
mm,
contexts where learning or knowledge applies quite well, where it doesn't apply very well. So I think all of those sort of things just start to connect, and I think the more we can fuse them together, yeah, that will deepen the learning.
sure, sure. So we've talked about it's not only for high attainers, it's possible for SEN students, and it doesn't, it's not just for older students, right? What's the last one then? Last myth.
The last one is that it's only for girls.
Oh,
I
okay.
think this has just come about. So you get to year 10, year 11, and students, less so now, but more so, they just used to
Mm,
make pages and pages of beautiful notes, or
yeah,
especially
yeah,
girls would often make the beautiful notes. And I know one of the crazes now is to do the loopy handwriting and do it with highlighter as well.
yeah.
And it looks really, really nice. And
Mm,
it kind of looks more active. It looks more, it looks like thinking's going on. And I think that's maybe where that myth comes from. Boys are maybe a little bit messier. The notes aren't quite as neat, or they seem maybe less organized. So some of those stereotypes and some of those things are true. Boys' handwriting, I think, typically is a little bit less neat, but it's not
hmm
always true. But I think just some of those stereotypes and some of those myths around what revision looks like and
mm,
what effective revision looks like really builds into that sort of myth of metacognition. Kind of like, well, if it doesn't look beautiful, if it doesn't really look like you're doing anything, then maybe you're not able to be metacognitive. But
mm,
as we've discussed, they can be. It's not about prettiness of handwriting or the use of a highlighter.
mm. Is it also to do with like the development? Because obviously girls develop a little bit quicker than boys, particularly like going through puberty, maybe their brain develops
Yeah,
slightly earlier. Yeah.
yeah. I hadn't sort of thought about that actually. That's a really interesting sort of side point. So when I was investigating the myth, that wasn't something that I sort of
Mm,
heard or thought about. But I think that's yeah. We often find that girls are that a little bit more mature, sort of
yeah.
lower on down in
Mm,
secondary school, don't we? So I think that would definitely play in because they're sitting there, they're maybe seeming a little bit more like they're concentrating or that they are sort of more engaged with the work. And I think that
mm.
definitely sort of it's that unconscious bias almost, isn't it? If a
Yep.
student
Yep.
looks at them working harder and is more on task, then you're probably going to think, oh, they've got more chance of doing well or being metacognitive. So yeah,
Mm.
that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. That'll definitely be worthy of a bit of research and seeing
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah. That's
on that.
interesting. Brilliant. So you talked a lot about the four myths of metacognition. Was there anything else that you wanted to add before we moved on?
I think that's everything. I think really the important thing is just knowing metacognition can be for any student, regardless of
Mm,
background, regardless of demographics, schooling, anything. Yeah, all the research says it works for all students, high priority attainers, mid, low, regardless of an ethnicity or
mm,
social economic background. Everybody's metacognitive. Every student can develop it. I mean, there's less research on who develop, with different ethnicities or schooling backgrounds lead to improvements, quicker or slower. But at the end of the
mm,
day, every student can move from being a tacit metacognitive practitioner and they can move up to becoming aware and becoming strategic and becoming reflective. So it's just, ignore the myths. Every student in front of you is capable. You might have to
mm.
scaffold, you might have to deliver it slightly differently, but that's true of everything that we teach students. So don't just say, they can't do it. Actually, let's go in there with an open mind and try and develop these skills in students.
That's brilliant. Are you ready to move on to the quick fire questions then?
Yes, let's go for it. I'll try and keep my answers quite quick fire as well.
How would your students describe you like before when you were still a maths
Yes.
teacher?
So three things I've written like strict warm. So
Mm,
I will hold high expectations for them, but I'm
yeah.
going to be really supportive and I'm really going to champion them. I'm really passionate. So whether I'm
Mm,
doing a cover lesson or if I'm teaching maths, I love what I'm teaching. I just want them
yeah.
to learn. And the
Yeah.
last thing is challenging. Not challenging
Mm,
in terms of like, oh, we've got to sit through him for an hour ago. Challenging in terms of I will push students. If they get to the end, I will give them another thing. I'll get them to reflect. I'll get them to think. I'm always going to want to push them because that's what learning's about, right? It's about pushing boundaries and knowing more. So I think that's how students would describe me, or at least how I hoped they would describe me.
Brilliant, thank you. Did you have any favorite go-to activities in the classroom? I mean, you can talk about specifically for encouraging their metacognition if you want to, or just like general maths activities.
Just generally, I think in any classroom I was in, really, even if I was doing cover, whatever, it was just mini whiteboards. I love a mini whiteboard. It's just such good assessment for learning. Instantly spot misconceptions. It keeps the pace of lessons so high as well, because if 28 out of 30 kids are getting it, then you don't need to do the next 2 or 3 questions you got lined up on your PowerPoint. Just move on, move to the next example, move to the next type of question. They're just brilliant resources to get the pace right, to make sure that the right students are getting the right support. And they're pretty fun as well. You know, it changes up a lesson of, you know, you're going to have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quick whiteboard. And I know a lot of people are resistant to them because kids doodle on them or they get thrown away or whatever. Have really strong expectations. And if kids are messing about with them, you know, just train kids. Kids just need training with mini whiteboards. That's what I've always found. As soon as you train them when to put them up, when not to, reinforce that with a behavior system if needed. If kids are messing about, they quickly get on board because they realize it's a really nice 5-10 minute, low stakes, high energy, fun way of learning. And it means that no one's wasting time, which, you know, kids say they want to waste time or just get through the end of the lesson now. They want to be learning. So actually, if we're delivering a strategy that means more effective learning, then they're going to like that as well.
Yeah, sure. And what would you be doing if you hadn't become a teacher or consultant? To have taken both of them away from you.
Yeah, I think it would have to be politician because obviously with my degree in background, I worked in politics before going to university, then did that degree. I think it would have probably been that. Whether as an elected official, because that was kind of like the route I was going down, or whether it be, you know, working as in a think tank or something like that. I think that seems the only logical other thing. Otherwise, working in Clark's shoe shop, because that was my university summer job, and I loved that. That was problem solving. That was working with people that were coming in. They wanted a solution. I found them some shoes that worked, and boom, they were out again in 5 minutes, and they were happy because they were at the shop and they could go on the rest of their day. So that was quite good fun as well, actually.
Yeah, thanks for that. Have there been any times where you regretted something you did or said in the classroom?
I remember my first year teaching. It was just after the Easter break, and I just took over a tutor group because one of the teachers in my department had got promotion, which meant that they needed to lose their tutor group to generate a bit of time. So even though I was training, I was happy to take on a tutor group, I was happy with the workload. Now, one thing that she did was every time whenever it's their birthday, she bought them a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
So I wanted to keep that tradition going. The problem was, it was quite expensive to buy the big chocolate bars for everybody. You know, I was in my first year of teaching, unqualified pay scale, had a little one at home, you know, money was tight. So I would buy a small chocolate bar rather than the big chocolate bars that she bought. And most of the kids were appreciative. And I just remember one kid just complaining, just being like, this isn't good enough, this isn't big enough, this isn't what we used to get. I remember I was so angry. And I did shout, and I was so disappointed. And that didn't help get the message across. And I think actually just a quiet word, or maybe just leaving it for that tutor period and speaking to her in the next lesson would have been a better way of going about it. And I think later on I did sort of say, look, I was really annoyed because I've used my own money to go and buy this. I've taken time out. I've not got home as early as I wanted to. But I just explained to her, you know, look, I've still spent this money. Yeah, maybe it's only £1 on you, but there's 30 people in here. That's an extra 30 quid plus the time.
Yeah.
And then she did understand. So it's just about the way that I went around doing it, I think, really.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. And do you have a question for me? So I fired like multiple questions at you. Anything for me?
So at the time of recording, we are, I think it's been about 16 hours since the general election was called. Now, what one policy would you like to see the government, or whoever is the next government, introduce? So when they walk into Downing Street on the 5th of July, whenever it is, on the 8th, whenever the new PM moves in, what would you like to see as the first policy that they introduce for education generally?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, there's been a lot of talk about well-being, I think. It's been just a lot of talk, though. I just feel. I mean, I feel there needs to be a lot more action. I think I would do because one thing I'm trying to do is to coach teachers, like being a life coach for teachers. So I would obviously put more funding or support towards having an initiative where there's more support for teachers. So at different stages of their careers, like particularly early career teachers, but also leaders,
Yeah,
like, the school leaders. So I think
yeah.
often they get a bit isolated at the top. And so I just feel there needs to be much more support and funding for initiatives that can support teachers, basically. I mean, it's a very vague answer, but that's what I would do.
But actions to the words, I guess. There's been a lot of
Yeah,
words, like you say, a
yeah,
lot is spoken of.
exactly. Yeah,
We'll do this, we'll do that. But actually, what's changing? Teachers are still leaving. Teachers are unhappy. We're not getting new people in. So,
yeah.
what's actually going to happen? What's going to change?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. My final question for you is, what is something that you hope all new teachers, like the early career teachers, knew? So based on all your experience now, and also now that you're a consultant for teachers, what would you like them to know?
I think the one main thing is never forget why we're doing it. So
Mm,
never forget how hard your day
mm,
is, however much the kids push you. You are there, not that one opportunity, but you are not a huge opportunity for them to improve their life chances. Remember why you've gone into schools. Some kids will come from very easy backgrounds, will have everything, but the majority of kids come from hard-working families, and they need to make sure that they get the education and support that they need to thrive in the future. So, we're not the last defense to an awful life, but we are such a major opportunity. And however hard it gets, just remember that what we're doing every single day, the students may never appreciate it, but if we're working hard and we're trying to teach them and we're giving them opportunities, the vast majority of kids will take them. The vast majority of the kids will appreciate it even now or in the future. And you are making a difference.
Oh, that's very beautiful. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you for coming on to the podcast. So I must say, it's been such a fascinating chat with you. You've made the topic of metacognition really accessible to us. Like, the four myths are very, very clear, and like, you've really just debunked them so well. I just want to add one thing, is that you mentioned just now to remember your why, right? I think you also have a very clear why right now in your career, and you're making a
Mhm.
huge impact on education and on teachers that you work with. So it's amazing the work that you're doing. I'm always, I think I tell this to every author or who's someone who's written a book that I meet.
Yeah,
I'm always jealous of those people, because that's something I think on my bucket list to do. And I'm absolutely amazed that you
yeah.
managed to write books while you were teaching. So please keep up the hard work. And yeah, like I said, it's been such
Thank
a
you,
pleasure
Alan.
talking to you.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
That was such a thought-provoking conversation with Nathan, and it really got me thinking in terms of how metacognition can deepen learning. He debunked the four myths of metacognition: that it's only for high attainers, that it's not for SEN students, it's just for older students, and only girls can do it. Clearly, those are all not true, and Nathan has a simple message for everyone out there, and that it's every student can be metacognitive. I hope you enjoyed listening to Nathan's extraordinary story, and please do join us again next time on Ordinary Teachers and Students.